Hi everyone and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different, something which I really can't believe I hadn't thought of to try before. I'm going to be talking about the new Disney Plus TV show WandaVision, obviously the TV show set in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, involving the characters from that show, which obviously isn't comics, but it's comics related, it's comics tangential. It's not going to be a review, it's going to be more of a kind of things I've liked, theories, just ideas of the show, because obviously there's so much going on. There's a great big central mystery thing, which is like my favorite kind of TV show, so there's obviously a lot to discuss and talk about. Obviously it's been pretty quiet on my channel for a little while. I've been a little bit busy with a little something like a currently running Kickstarter, which you might find links for down below, and obviously if you do want to back and share that would be greatly appreciated. But now we're going to get into this whole WandaVision magic and sort of figure out exactly what is sort of going on and what's going down in the town of Westview, New Jersey. Obviously, massive spoilers, so if you haven't seen any of WandaVision, and in particular haven't seen up to episode 5, I would say do not watch this video. Head away now, come back once you've seen it all. You do not want to spoil this show for yourself, because it is epically wonderful and you really need to sort of get it the same way that everyone else has who's been surprising themselves as soon as it is. Once you've seen it though, head on back and enjoy the discussion and just listen to the things which have gone through and stuck in my head when I'm watching WandaVision. Obviously the episode starts off with us going back to the classic sitcom format, which made up the first 3 episodes in the series so far, looking this time at more of a sitcoms from the 80s kind of idea. It kind of felt very late 80s, but it's definitely still that kind of vibe. I would say it's great to see that coming back, but what is particularly interesting is that this scenario is breaking down and not working a lot more often than in the initial 3 episodes. It's interesting that this kind of implies that perhaps that Wanda is beginning to lose control of the situation, particularly with the more outside influences which are coming in, now that we know that Sword is set up outside, and obviously trying to figure out what's going on, much like the rest of us watching the show. The first point I found really interesting with this particular episode was the fact that Wanda clearly doesn't have control of the kids. The twins, which were born in episode 3, seem to be completely immune to Wanda's control, even though, as far as we can tell, they were created by Wanda. Another interesting nitpick involving the babies was that when Agnes comes in, and her character, who already seems kind of interesting and bizarre anyway, she breaks character when Vision tries to stop her from rocking the babies, and we see something really interesting happen, which actually happened before as well. The babies stop crying when Wanda isn't thinking about them. When Wanda's sort of confused about why Agnes is confused and why Agnes is asking these questions of her, suddenly the baby's crying just ceases. This happened actually before in episode 3 when Geraldine mentioned Ultron. All of a sudden, when Wanda's kind of breaking out of this American housewife character she's built for herself, the baby stopped making noises. It's almost as though the babies only exist when Wanda's thinking about them, which is a bizarre kind of thing to see, because despite all that happening, she has no control over these kids and they seem to be independent of her. For that matter, Agnes is again proving herself to be an interesting character, because she appears to be the only person in Westview who is aware of what's going on. She seems to think more like she's an actress being kept hostage and is aware of the situation, in that she kind of, even asks, shall we just set that up again kind of thing. So like, what is exactly her deal? Obviously previous episodes mentioned that there was a person in witness protection who was in the town, and that's why it came to the attention of Jimmy Woo. Is Agnes that character? Is she the character who's in WITSEC? And as well as that, is she really Agatha from the comic books, as has been theorized? Another element I absolutely loved once we see the kids sort of age up is that they maintain the color schemes of Billy and Tommy from the comic books. For those who are a little unsure, Billy and Tommy were originally created by Wanda during this moment, decades ago, where her and Vision were having that sort of house life kind of fantasy, and then reappeared many years later as new characters called Billy and Tommy, who would be twins even though they were essentially born to different families. It's a long, convoluted comic souls kind of business, but yeah, basically they turned out to be the same characters who have these independent families but are actually brothers and are also related to Wanda Maximoff, who is their real mother in a way. It's complicated comic stuff. But yeah, it's kind of interesting that they've kept those formats, you know, with the obvious exception of Tommy's hair, who in the comics has a silver hairstyle similar to Quicksilver, Wanda's brother, but in obviously the show so far is a brunette. The opening credits of WandaVision, like the fantasy TV show within the show, start then, and it's another little interesting little theme tune. I keep on wondering if some of these lyrics are actually tying into things, maybe secret suggestions as to where things are going. But something I immediately noticed when it was doing the various sort of shots of Westview throughout the ages, blah blah blah, there's no kids. The only children we've seen are the twins, with the exception of the kids who appear in the commercial breaks, which is interesting. Like, we've obviously already heard the phrase "for the children," which was immediately kind of creepy and sinister in the second episode, and made us think, like, what's it about? And it kind of makes you wonder if maybe what the idea is that the Westview residents are almost playing along. I think they are controlled, absolutely, that is covered. It's explicitly said they're being controlled, but they are almost not okay with it, but doing it and sort of part of it because something's happened to the kids. There must have been kids in Westview before whatever is going on now. It's something which obviously even comes up in the show itself, as Vision notices himself, and it mentions it towards the end of the episode. So there's definitely something interesting going on with the kids, and the fact that the only children that we see in this show are the twins. We then come out of that into the mainstream Marvel Cinematic Universe, main universe reality thing, and follow Monica Rambeau as she's come out of what is being called now the Hex, which is the area which has been isolated by Wanda, that is Westview. We see her sort of going through like a medical thing, and that immediately brings up like another little interesting moment in that she's having like an MRI scan kind of thing, and the results come up with this sort of almost blank image, which just looks like, to me, light being bounced back somehow. Now, obviously, fans of the comic books will know that Monica Rambeau is a superhero in her own right, who's gone through various names throughout history, including Captain Marvel, but also Photon and Spectrum. Obviously, things are all to do with light, so could this be our first hint that Monica is actually getting her own superpowers? There's then a briefing with Sword and the Sword director, and it's all kind of interesting, kind of setting up almost an antagonist arc for the director. But one element which I found particularly interesting, which I don't think many people have picked up on right now, is how they made a very much in continuity mention of the fact that Wanda doesn't have a code name. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I don't think that Wanda has ever actively been called the Scarlet Witch as a kind of code name or sort of moniker that she uses in her sort of superhero activities. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, in fact, we can clearly see that the term terrorist is continuing to stick around with her despite her being on the Avengers for a number of years. It then tries to highlight that element that she's a terrorist, that she's an attacker, that she is the antagonist, by then showing a video that she had broken into Sword's facility and stolen the corpse of Vision. It's all very much set up as being a case of, yeah, this is showing that there's something going on with Wanda, and that there's possibly something negative and angry going on with her, etc. And they make a big deal of her sort of almost not honouring Vision's wishes about not to be used as a weapon after he passes, etc. The thing, however, which struck me is, why did Sword have his body in the first place? If his final will and testament said that he just wanted to never be used as a weapon, then why isn't he not just buried? Obviously in a protected area or something, presumably, so no one can unbury him. But like, instead we see a video where he's in the Sword facility and he's been pulled apart. He's not even a singular corpse anymore. And the thing is, that's not what Thanos did to him. Thanos obviously only took the Infinity Gem out of his head, and we've kind of seen it in episode 4, where we saw Vision have that moment where he's like the zombie Vision, and he's all together, but he's just got a huge chunk out of his head. Instead, when we see the video from the Sword facility, he's all in pieces. He's been pulled apart, which kind of implies that maybe Sword are doing something with his corpse, which kind of makes me think that there's actually going to be a heel turn in the near future, where we might actually see that Sword is itself actually the antagonist behind everything going on, if not behind the Westview phenomenon, certainly possibly the reason as to what set Wanda off. When we go back into the sitcom universe, we then see the kids have aged up again. They have gone from 5 to 10, and in that whole scene we actually get to see that the characters of Billy and Tommy kind of retain their characterizations from the comic books. When Wanda asks them about the dog in the sink, like what's the dog doing in the sink, Tommy gives a sarcastic joke response, whereas Billy is a lot more sincere and kind of almost melancholic. And I think that really fits in with what the characters are like in the comic books. So it's really interesting that they're setting that up straight away, because it kind of makes me feel that these characters are sticking around. It's at this point through the episode that actually things jump back and forth between the WandaVision universe and Marvel Cinematic Reality, and we kind of see dip in and out. And as such, one of the next scenes is then back into reality and what's going on at the Sword base outside Westview. And it's a really interesting line which I picked up from Monica, where she says, "I know an aerospace engineer who'd be up to this challenge." And it kind of makes me want to think, who's she talking about? Are we to expect another surprise cameo of a character who exists already? Or is this going to be a brand new character to the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Let me know who you think the aerospace engineer she mentions is, and drop it in the link below. Obviously, they're talking about the tank-like vehicle, which we've seen in some of the trailers. So obviously this is definitely something which is coming up. So who do you think might have built that? Darcy and Jimmy mention Captain Marvel, and we have an interesting moment with Monica where she kind of pauses and then very quickly moves the conversation on. Darcy and Jimmy clearly notice it, and I think the audience does too, because it makes us wonder then, what has happened? Have Monica and Captain Marvel had a falling out? Is there something going on there? But there's another two possibilities that it kind of made me think about. And you never know, maybe it is, maybe I'm way off base with it, but like, I'm just going to sort of go through what it kind of brought up to my mind. The first step being that, okay, the idea that she doesn't want to talk about Captain Marvel, why could that be? And to me, I think it may link to the fact that Jimmy or Darcy, I can't actually remember, mentioned that wasn't that another hero who got their powers from an Infinity Stone. And that was kind of when you see Monica sort of change track immediately. And I'm wondering, is this a remnant of Wanda's control? Is Monica outside of Hex but still has Wanda in her head? And could that actually be something we will see again in the future? Another possibility which came up to me was, is Monica Monica? It's a very complicated thing, potentially, to do with like timings and how things happen, but obviously there was a gap in time between her returning in the blip and her going back to Sword. Could she have been replaced by a Skrull in that time? It's a very out there thing. For me, it just comes from the fact that in her medical, she wants to get out of there pretty quickly. She declines having any more bloods drawn. She doesn't want the MRI taken again, which obviously didn't correctly image her. For all we know, that could be a hint of Monica's powers coming through. It could also be a hint of maybe something Skrulls can use to subterfuge through the situation. Yeah, could it be that Monica isn't Monica? Coming back into Westview, we see Vision at his place of work, which still is a mystery. We don't know what they do other than possibly just to have a way to have Vision out of sight and out of mind for a moment for Wanda, and hopefully have him get wrapped up in something which is possibly another element of her control. They have email, they're installing computers, they do this whole thing with email, but the email which comes through is a communique from Sword. What's more interesting as well is Norm, one of Vision's colleagues, starts reading it, and then all the other colleagues in the room start reading it out loud. Is this sort of just some sort of symptom of Wanda's control? Is this Wanda sort of getting that communique and then sort of reading it, and everyone who's connected to it are essentially reading it at the same time? Oh no. Heading back to the family home, we see the twins talking to Wanda about where Vision is, and they seem confused about Wanda's assertion that it's Monday when they say it was Saturday this morning. How is it Monday now? So it's clear that the kids, not only are they not able to be controlled by Wanda and seem to be completely independent, they were able to question her. They're able to sort of actually be like, no, this don't make any sense. And that's interesting, because if they aren't actual kids, which have been controlled by Wanda, which seems to be the prevailing theory, then who are they? Where have they come from? And why are they able to question Wanda in this way? It makes me kind of wonder if, did Wanda create them, or did someone else? We then get that awesome scene of Wanda coming out from the Hex Dome and confronting the sword agents. And it was really awesome. I love the nice little touch that Elizabeth Olsen put in, where her accent as Wanda returns, instead of her doing the American housewife mom thing. We get that sort of stare down between the two groups, Wanda versus Sword, and it's a nice little element to see what's going on there, because it really does seem to push that idea that Wanda is an antagonist here, that she knowingly is doing everything that's going on, and that she is the bad guy almost. So it actually seems to be playing into what the director of Sword had said. We also get a very interesting moment when she walks back into the field, where she seems to do something to it, because it suddenly sort of has this red energy spread out through it. So what has happened to the Hex Dome? Is it now impenetrable? Does it mean that no one else can come in, or nothing else can come in? That seems the most likely possibility, but just obviously theories to spin out there. Any reason do you think that the dome turned red? Wanda and the kids have an interesting moment when they find Sparky, the dog, has died, and the kids sort of ask her to bring it back to life, and then Wanda has an interesting little speech about grief and death and the sanctity of death, and how some things just cannot be undone. And this is really interesting because we know that's not the case with Wanda. Like, we know that Vision has returned from the dead. It makes you wonder, possibly, did Wanda do that? Or has someone else brought Vision back for Wanda? Skipping to the end and past, obviously, that conversation, like say, where Vision realises that there are no kids in Westview, and we see Wanda and Vision actually have an argument. And although we're in Westview, we are getting the traditional sort of Marvel Cinematic Universe presentation, so we know that now we're getting like the real deal of what's going on and not the controlled reality that we've been seeing. And we get an interesting moment where the two characters, Wanda and Vision, are arguing. Vision's like really finally seems to be coming out of Wanda's control here. And that's interesting in itself, like Wanda losing control of the situation. But she also then says that she doesn't know how any of this started to begin with. This, for me, is really interesting because it could imply that, okay, yeah, maybe Wanda is doing everything now and she's making sure that the control is still happening, that the town of Westview is still under this sort of mass delusion. But it means that essentially she didn't start that. Someone else did it, and makes me wonder if maybe someone did it to her. Because if she's got lost time, just like Vision says that he's got lost time, then it can mean that potentially someone was actually bringing this together. In which case, who was that someone? We then get the big reveal of the episode, which has been made a lot of by a lot of people, in that Pietro turns up at the door, but it's not the Pietro which we are familiar with from Age of Ultron, but in fact Pietro Quicksilver as he appears in the Fox X-Men movies. Yes, this is a big and interesting twist, and yes, there's certainly plenty to talk about. I've got to admit, I was a little surprised by how surprised everyone is about his appearance. I'm pretty certain they announced the casting of Evan Peters months and months back, so I'm a little surprised that people were so shocked to see him turn up. Moreover, it feels like with a show which has been about family and everything, the fact that Pietro turns up, I think, was kind of obvious going to happen eventually. Absolutely, there's a ton of interesting discussion to be had about the appearance of Evan Peters as Pietro Quicksilver and what this might mean for the MCU going forward, and there's certainly loads of places have gone through it, I think, in a lot more detail than I'm going to. But yes, I think it is quite possible that it could mean the potential start of bringing mutants into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I don't think that it will mean that the characters as they've been in the Fox films are going to come across. I think that this is just this one particular instance. I'm not even sure that I think we'll see Evan Peters stick around as the Quicksilver of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think this is just going to be for the show. I could entirely be wrong. We definitely know that the next phase of Marvel films are going to bring in a multiverse theory and how that all works. There's all kinds of theories out there as to how the multiverse might work and how the various characters in various films are going to be dealing with it. Whether that might be the reason for things like Fantastic Four and mutants coming into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Not sure how I feel about that. I think it would make things a little bit convoluted, where you could just have your mutants be a part of the mainstream Marvel Cinematic Universe and like they always were, we just didn't follow them or something. But it's a long discussion of this probably benefits to all kinds of stories for it, so who knows. The big thing for me is obviously, what does this appearance of Evan Peters' Quicksilver mean? Is he the Pietro of the Marvel Cinematic Universe who's just been, as Darcy comments, recast, and is Evan Peters then just some random, or is he actually Quicksilver from the Fox X-Men universe in now this, and sort of being controlled in the same way that everyone else is? Is it the same way as everyone else's? Because Wanda was genuinely surprised. She did not make him appear at the door, and she does seem surprised when she sees him. And even more interesting, she seems to recognize him, which in theory she shouldn't. Like, in theory this isn't her brother, or certainly no recognizable physicality of her brother. Does that mean that she can sense his essence or some kind of airy-fairy thing like that? Or is someone telling her that it's Pietro? Perhaps for someone who's behind everything to begin with. Certainly Vision doesn't recognize him at all. Obviously, that's kind of brings us to the end of episode 5, and obviously it left us with a ton of new questions, a ton of the old questions, but also a few wrinkles and more answers. But who do you think is really behind everything? Is there someone really behind everything? Do you think Wanda really is actually just had a complete mental break and in control of everything? Or is someone actually controlling her as well? Obviously, a lot of theories have gone from what is essentially Marvel's closest thing to the devil, Mephisto, to Nightmare, to maybe Agatha, or who is Agnes in the show, might be involved in this. I think it could be a number of things. I think we're still at that stage where you can't really tell. It could really just be that Wanda's had a mental break. I mean, she's gone through so much. There's that line when she is going back into the hex field, where she says that, you know, she's got everything she wants and no one is going to take it from her again. Obviously, we've seen her brother get taken from her parents, got taken from them both, but before that, off camera, like before they were introduced. Then obviously Vision gets taken from her. Like, her whole life and existence has just been things being pulled from her forcibly and painfully. So this could absolutely just be a person who's gone past the brink of no return and just broken and has gone off the deep end, which, for fans of the comic books, will know obviously that is not unusual for the character. Like, Scarlet Witch has had moments of that. These often, however, get retconned to be that there was some sort of outside influence and involvement. So it could still be the case that we have a Mephisto involved, or we have Nightmare involved. There's also the possibility that it's actually a very terrestrial thing which is involved. I think that is something we could yet see. And that we never know. It could be that Sword is somehow involved in what happened in the first place. As I say, I think it's very suspicious that they had Vision's corpse to begin with. Anyway, that wraps up with my thoughts on episode 5 of WandaVision. I'll probably do one of these little videos again after each episode. Like, I'm not going to say a set day for release. As you know, my channel's very relaxed and lax when it comes to that. It'll go up when it goes up, and I will talk about it. And I may not always go for this fabulous makeup design, which is obviously not fabulous. I'm learning, but I'm playing and I'm enjoying it. Leave a comment below with what you thought about the episode and what you've been thinking of WandaVision in general. Maybe give us some of your own theories, maybe like really interesting ones I might bring up in a future video. That's been me, Joe Glass. Welcome to my channel as ever. If you did enjoy the video, please like, please subscribe for future videos, and I will see you all soon.